Chapter 41, A Rare Genius. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Yes, the iron wire is George's trump card for controlling the flying broom. Whether the flying broom flies well or not mainly depends on whether the wizard is proficient in operating the flying broom. By wrapping a circle of iron wire on the flying broom, in addition to relying on magic to control the flying broom, he can also use magnetism to make more detailed adjustments, double protection, in fact. With the weight of his clone of dozens of kilograms, the magnetism alone can fly, but it is not as fast as the flying broom. This operation is also used on his magic wand. There is a circle of iron wire at the end of his magic wand. The purpose is to be able to summon it back instantly after the magic wand is out of hand. Hold the broom steady, rise a few feet, then lean forward slightly and fall vertically back to the ground. Listen to my whistle. 3, 2, 1. As Ms. Hooch whistled, the little wizards all stomped their feet and flew into the air on their flying brooms. However, most of them were not very stable after flying in the air, and they maintained it carefully one by one. But there were also some who flew very well and quickly because they had experience, such as Ginny. Ginny, very good, you fly quite well. Ginny's outstanding performance soon attracted Hooch's attention, and he couldn't help but praise her loudly, ready to give Gryffindor extra points, but she was soon interrupted by a cry of surprise. Turning her head to the right Slytherin side, her face suddenly showed an incredible look. Oh, Merlin, this is the starfish hanging upside down, the Wollongong Z-shaped flying technique, the sloth hugging the tree rolling, and the one-sky feint. This is impossible. What did she see? She saw George, the star of Slytherin, who actually used a difficult Quidditch move that only world-class Quidditch players can master. Like the starfish hanging upside down, it is a move that only top flying broom goalkeepers can do. When the quaffle is about to enter but there is no time to defend it, immediately hang upside down on the broomstick with one foot and block the quaffle by spreading your limbs. Wollongong Z-shaped flight is a superb technique for the chaser to move forward at high speed in a zigzag shape to confuse the opponent's chaser. Sloth hugging tree roll. When the bludger attacks, the player hangs on the broomstick, holds the broomstick handle tightly with both hands and feet, and quickly rotates the broomstick to bounce the bludger like a drill. Wronski feint. The seeker pretends to see the snitch far below and rushes to the ground, asking the opponent's seeker to imitate him. But the former stops diving when it is about to hit the ground, so that the opponent has no time to react and hits the ground and feints. This move requires the seeker to have extreme control over the broomstick. If you learn any of these 4 moves, you can apply for any position of seeker, chaser, beater and keeper in the national Quidditch team. Even she couldn't do all 4 moves smoothly, let alone use the sweeping series broom used for school teaching. You should know that the sweeping series broom used for school teaching has a history of several decades. It is natural to fly in class, but if the speed is too fast, it will tremble and be difficult to control. However, look at George. Not only can he control it, but he can also do these 4 difficult classic moves. Slytherin plus 20 points. You can practice freely. George, come with me. After George landed smoothly, Hua Chi shouted excitedly, walked forward and pulled George towards the castle. Is this really your first time riding a flying broom? She asked incredulously as she walked. George pretended to be a little shy and nodded. Is it impossible to ride where I live? But I have read some books and related introductions about Quidditch. He knew his plan was successful. With the strength of his body and the stable control of the flying broom by magnetism, he could do ballet and Thomas turns on the flying broom without any problem, not to mention the 4 moves just now. Oh, really? This is incredible. Hooch was a little incoherent after hearing George's answer. In the office of the Dean of Slytherin, Snape was sitting on a chair writing his research experience on the newly created potion. He was suddenly disturbed by the urgent knock on the door. He couldn't help but frowned and waved his wand to open the door. Ms. Hooch, is there something so important that you need to be so anxious? Seeing that the visitors were Hooch, the flying class teacher, and the most outstanding student in his college, he relaxed his brows a little. Hooch excitedly pushed George in front of Snape. Professor Snape, your Slytherin has a Quidditch genius that is rare in 1,000 years. You can't believe it. He used it the first time he rode a flying broom. Is everything you said true? After hearing Hooch's words, Snape, who always had a blank expression, became calm. as the Dean of Slytherin, he had a very deep affection for Slytherin College. He had always been upset about Slytherin's loss to Gryffindor last year, especially Gryffindor with Harry. If George really had such a strong flying broom talent, then Slytherin would not lose again in the next 7 years. I'm not old enough to be dazzled, and many children in your college saw it. Hooch seemed a little angry at Snape's questioning. Snape said quickly. I'm not questioning you, I'm just a little surprised. He turned his head to look at George, revealing a smile that was uglier than crying. George, you're very good, always very good. I will personally arrange for you to join the Slytherin Quidditch team on Saturday. Gryffindor can make an exception, and so can we Slytherin. That. Professor, I don't really want to join the Quidditch team. George pretended to be a little embarrassed and replied, hearing George's words. Hooch and Snape were both stunned, and then asked almost at the same time. Why, you know, joining the Quidditch team is the dream of every little wizard, and George has such a high-flying broom, he is simply a natural Quidditch player. George looked up at Snape and coughed. It's like this, because compared to Quidditch, I prefer to study magic, especially defense against the dark arts, and Professor Lockhart's defense against the dark arts class is so I need more time to study by myself, but after joining Quidditch, I must train frequently, so I don't have enough time. Alas, self-study is still difficult. What you said makes sense. Compared to Quidditch, learning magic is the foundation. Lockhart is indeed a fool. Snape couldn't help but fall into deep thought after hearing this. In his opinion, learning magic is definitely more important than Quidditch. He doesn't have much interest in Quidditch. As the Dean, he naturally hopes that Slytherin can win the Quidditch Cup. So, if you join the Slytherin team, I will try my best not to ask them to train with you. In the future, I will take half a day every weekend to help you with the defense against the dark arts course. Chapter 42. The most suitable one is the strongest. You are listening at novelfull.audio. If that's the case, then there's no problem. Hearing Snape's answer, George nodded without hesitation. He went around in such a circle for this purpose. Lockhart could only learn the Oblivion Charm, but everything else was a mess. For dark magic, he still had to ask Snape, and he was tutoring alone once a week, which was equivalent to him becoming Snape's close disciple. As time went by, and his relationship came to an end, it was not impossible for him to become a foster father directly. A person is shameless and invincible. In order to improve his strength, it is not impossible to have a foster father. Seeing George agreeing so readily, Snape was stunned for a moment. He felt like he was being tricked for some reason, but after thinking about it, it didn't seem to matter. There was a genius in his college, and he was willing to be more partial. When the notice reached Snape, Hooch took George back to the lawn outside the castle. As soon as George came back, he was surrounded by the little wizards, asking what he was taken to buy Miss Wachi. He didn't hide everything about this. He directly said that he met Dean Snape and was admitted to the Slytherin Quidditch team, but he didn't mention tutoring. This answer naturally made the little wizards explode. The little wizards in Slytherin were immediately elated, while the little wizards in Gryffindor were a little depressed. I thought I could beat him in the broomstick class, but I didn't expect to lose even in this aspect. Ginny looked at George, who was surrounded inside. Colin on the side was not frustrated at all, but raised his camera and took photos. No way, he is George, and he works really hard. I heard that he is the last one to leave the common room every night, and he is also our friend. You're right, at least it's George, not anyone else. Ginny also had a smile on her face. George is not just a little better than them, but he crushes them in all aspects, and he works so hard, it's hard to make people jealous. After the flying lesson, looking at the back of George walking to the auditorium with other little wizards, Miss Hooch put away all the broomsticks with her wand and couldn't help but murmured. No, I have to talk to Bagman about this. Maybe we can reverse our position in international Quidditch these years. Ludo Bagman, now the director of the Department of Magical Sports and Sports of the British Ministry of Magic, is also a senior on the Quidditch team she met before retiring to teach at Hogwarts. In recent years, the English Quidditch team has almost suffered repeated defeats, and is almost at the bottom of the international Quidditch team. If a once-in-a-millennium talent like George joins the team, It might be possible to reverse the current situation of the English Quidditch team, as for George being still young and still in school. Recently, a fifth-year student at Durmstrang Academy of Magic named Victor Krum was admitted to the Bulgarian Quidditch team because of his genius as a seeker. Naturally, George can do the same. She felt that George's talent in Quidditch was definitely above that of Victor Krum. George joined the Slytherin team, which just in time for Bagman to come and watch this year's Hogwarts Quidditch match. In the evening, the news that George was admitted to the Slytherin team as an exception spread throughout the school, including the difficult moves he used in flying lessons. Many young wizards who are obsessed with Quidditch know those well-known moves very well. This also raised George's reputation throughout Slytherin and the entire school to a higher level. The senior Slytherin spoke to him more politely, of course. Not all Slytherins were happy about this, such as Malfoy, who had just made his father spend a lot of money to join the team. But apparently there was nothing he could do except sulk. Time soon came to Saturday. Early that morning, George was called over by Snape, who wanted to give George extra lessons, make-up classes every Saturday morning, which is what he promised George. What I'm teaching now is the repel spell. This spell is a basic spell, but don't underestimate the basic spell. As long as it is used well, the basic spell can also exert greater power than the high-level spells. Just like this repelling spell, if used well, it can even repel the fire dragon. Under Snape's strict but detailed guidance, George truly gained a deeper understanding of dark magic and magical combat. He used to think that Avada's gnawing big melon and the severe fire curse should be the most powerful curses. One of them will kill you, and the other has a very wide range and can even burn down an entire city, but through Snape's explanation, he understood that this was not the case. Facing different enemies in different scenarios, the most suitable spell was the strongest spell. Sometimes Avada's gnawing melon and fire spell may not be as effective as a basic enchantment. Facing small and flexible enemies, the death curse cannot hit at all, and a freezing curse with a larger range but less power is needed. There are also magical animals like fire dragons with extremely high magic resistance. Even if they are hit by the death curse and the fire curse, it is no big deal. On the contrary, the eye disease curse that targets eye attacks can play a very good role. The same is true for the knockback spell, because it uses magical power to form a forward physical air pressure attack in front of you, so even if you have high magic resistance, you are not immune. A repelling spell like that used by a master like Dumbledore could really send the fire dragon flying away. In the afternoon, Snape personally took George to the Quidditch pitch outside the castle. However, there seemed to be not only the Slytherin team but also the Gryffindor team on the court at this time, and something was obviously not right. The members of the Slytherin team were all paralyzed with laughter. Captain Flint was laughing so hard that he couldn't stand upright, using his new broom to support himself. Malfoy was on all fours, beating the ground with his two fists. On the other side, all the members of the Gryffindor team gathered around Ron, as well as Hermione and Colin, who was holding a camera to take pictures. At this time, Ron was spitting out big shiny slugs. "What's going on?" Snape asked grimly. Seeing Snape's appearance, the Slytherin players immediately stood up straight in fear. Captain Flint hurriedly said, "Dean, I came to the stadium with the note you approved, but Wood was unwilling to let it go." Their second-year Ron Weasley took the opportunity to attack Malfoy, but he failed to use the spell and it rebounded on him. Today the court belongs to the Slytherin team. Ron Weasley used magic to attack his classmates in school. Gryffindor deducted 10 points. Snape gave the punishment expressionlessly, and then after seeing Harry who was in charge of Ron, he immediately added with disgust. "Potter, you are right next to Ron. Why don't you stop him? Do you think that if he makes a mistake, you will be better?" Another 10 points from Gryffindor. Harry, who was already unhappy because Gryffindor was deducted points, was stunned when he heard Snape's words. George couldn't help but twitch when he saw this. To be honest, he really sympathized with Harry, but there is no way. Who makes you not Harley? Chapter 43, Scheming Boy George. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Professor Snape, we have booked the entire Quidditch pitch in advance, and it was because Malfoy called Hermione a mudblood that Ron attacked Malfoy. Facing the terrifying Snape, Wood and others did not dare to refute even if they were angry. but Harry was unwilling to give up. Snape's eyes became even more severe when he heard this. How dare you lie? Malfoy, did you call Hermione a mudblood? At this moment, George suddenly spoke before Malfoy and asked. Malfoy felt that with Snape around, Wood and the others did not dare to be presumptuous. They held their heads high and said proudly, "She is a mudblood. Hogwarts should not accept a mudblood as a student. It's not up to you to decide who Hogwarts accepts as students." Upon hearing Malfoy's remarks, Snape immediately turned his head and scolded him sternly. You must know that his favorite witch, Harry's mother, Lily Evans, was also a child born into a Muggle family. Seeing that his goal was achieved, George retreated calmly. Malfoy was obviously frightened by Snape, who had always been tolerant of him, and quickly shut up. Snape looked at Harry again. Cancel the deduction just now, but Potter, because you contradicted the teacher, Gryffindor will be deducted 5 points for this. Harry wanted to retort, but Hermione grabbed his arm. Just now it was deducted 20 points, now it is only deducted 5 points, which is much better. Vomit. At this moment Ron opened his mouth, and a bunch of slugs came out of his mouth again. The curse stops immediately. George stepped forward and waved his wand, and a blue magic beam hit Ron, and the slug in Ron's mouth disappeared immediately. During the tutoring session, Snape said that if you encounter a black magic that you don't know about counter spells, you can try the universal breaking spell first. Now that I've tried it, I didn't expect it to work. Thank you, George. Ron, who returned to normal, immediately thanked him. Harry and Hermione also nodded towards George. They knew that if George hadn't talked too much just now and tempted Malfoy to tell the truth, Gryffindor would have been deducted 15 more points. George blinked quietly, then stepped back to Snape. I want to try the universal breaking spell I just learned. Snape heard this and said calmly. George helps his classmate with the treatment. Slytherin gets 5 points. The heads of the little wizards of the Slytherin team, which had just been drooped, were raised again. Okay, this is over. Next, the Slytherin team will train 2 new players. You can leave. After hearing Snape's words of chasing people away, Wood immediately led everyone out of the Quidditch pitch. However, after leaving the stadium, Harry, Ron and Hermione quietly returned and hid in the audience stand to take a peek. They didn't want to peek at the Slytherin team's information, but simply wanted to know who would be the new Seeker, George or Malfoy. They found out yesterday through Ginny that George was going to join the Slytherin team. At that time, they thought that George must be Slytherin's Seeker, just like Harry last year, but today they learned that Malfoy had already become Slytherin because his father was the owner of the team and had changed to the latest Nimbus 2001. New Seeker, so they are worried that George's joining the team may not go smoothly. You should all know about George. He can use a teaching broomstick to perform difficult moves that are difficult for players on the international Quidditch team to perform, so I decided that he would be the team's new Seeker. After Wood and others left, Snape began to announce George's position on the team. When Malfoy heard this, his expression suddenly changed. Dean, we agreed that I would be the new Seeker. You promised my father. Darian Pusey and Terence Higgs have withdrawn from the team to focus on their studies. Malfoy, you will serve as the new Chaser. Snape replied without hesitation. This was the arrangement he had thought of last night. Little Malfoy does have a good talent for flying broomsticks, and his father's generosity has greatly improved the strength of the Slytherin team. Then it is very reasonable and in the interests of Slytherin to replace Terence Higgs, who lost a first-year Harry in terms of strength, and let little Malfoy take over. And now that there is a broomstick genius like George, the most important position of Seeker will naturally be given to George. However, after all, little Malfoy brought a lot of value, so he replaced the dispensable chaser Adrian Pusey. Dean, I don't agree. I want to be the Seeker to compete with Potter. Malfoy immediately shouted. Now everyone knows that he is going to be the Seeker of the Slytherin team. If it were replaced by George, everyone would be in a big loss, and he always wanted to overpower Harry. Only the same Seeker had hope. Dean, you know George is friends with Harry and has a good relationship with the people in Gryffindor. If you let him be the Seeker, he will definitely give Harry a try. Malfoy, do you think we Slytherin wizards can't be friends with Gryffindors? At this time George walked in front of Malfoy. I think let alone friends, as long as it's suitable, it's not impossible to find a Gryffindor which is my wife in the future. We are all wizards from Hogwarts. It is normal to compete with each other, but it is unreasonable that we cannot be friends or lovers just because we are from different colleges. Who stipulates that only people from one college can be friends and can be married? The other members of the Slytherin team were all shocked when they heard George's bold remarks. They thought that George would be severely reprimanded by Snape next. Dean, you see what I said was right. If George was a seeker, he would definitely let Harry go. He actually wanted to find a group of mudbloods from Gryffindor as his wife. A wizard from Slytherin wants to find a wizard from Gryffindor as his wife. This is simply the biggest joke I have heard today. Shut up, upside down. Snape cast a spell with an ugly face and hung Malfoy upside down. Either be a chaser or get out of the team. Little guy, fight me. George's mouth slightly raised when he saw this. He just said that deliberately to draw out Malfoy's words. Malfoy didn't know that the biggest pain in Snape's heart was that because he was sorted into different colleges and because he was proud of his Slytherin status, he said some excessive words, which led to Lily being snatched away by Potter. Malfoy's words were simply a slap in Snape's face. Dean, I think Malfoy doesn't seem to be convinced. How about this, let's have a competition. Whoever grabs the golden snitch first will be the Slytherin seeker. He wanted to make Malfoy convinced and never dare to provoke him again in the future, and establish his position in Slytherin. The golden bell fell. With a wave of his wand, Snape put Malfoy down. Malfoy's parents had a close relationship with him. In addition to being Death Eaters, they were also classmates. He almost became Malfoy's godfather, so if Malfoy hadn't always hurt his heart today, he wouldn't have been so strict with Malfoy. Okay, let's have a game. The winner will be the seeker and the loser will be the chaser. Chapter 44 Little Malfoy, Master. You are listening at novelfull.audio. This is the golden snitch. When I let it go, it will fly at high speed in the stadium. Whoever catches it first will be the team seeker. Captain Flint, who is suspected to have troll blood and is taller than Snape, explained with a walnut-sized, golden metal ball with a pair of small silver wings. Okay, let's start now. Flit let go, and the golden snitch flew out at a super fast speed, and Malfoy and George followed closely behind. The golden snitch is very fast and very flexible. Even if you catch up with it, it can easily leave you behind with a turn, just like Malfoy at this time. Because the flying broom accelerated too fast, there was no time to brake when the golden snitch turned, and it flew a long way before turning back, but George was different. When the golden snitch turned, he immediately controlled the flying broom to turn, and the inertia of the flying broom was completely twisted by the iron wire controlled by the magnetic force. After completely catching up with the golden snitch, George stretched out his hand and grabbed it like lightning. The golden snitch dodged quickly, and George's magnetic control came into play again. Although the golden snitch is a magical product, it is also a metal product, so it will naturally be affected by his magnetic force. It would be too obvious to force it to stop, but who can see it if it slightly affects the speed? Because of George's magnetic force, the reaction speed of the golden snitch slowed down by 1 second, and in that second, George had already firmly grasped it in his hand. So fast, less than a minute. Seeing the golden snitch being caught by George, Snape and the team members below were also shocked. Although this is not a formal game, without the interference of the two teams' players and the quaffle and bludger, the difficulty of catching the golden snitch is greatly reduced, but catching it in 1 minute is too fast. You should know that in previous Quidditch games, there is a record of catching the golden snitch in 3 months at the latest, which shows how difficult it is to catch it. Harry, if George becomes the Slytherin seeker, you're done. Among the 3 people who were peeking, Ron looked at Harry with sympathy, and Harry also had a bitter face, but Hermione next to him said. But if George becomes the seeker, Malfoy will definitely be pissed off, which seems not bad. Ron and Harry's eyes lit up when they heard this, and nodded in agreement. Seeing Malfoy get humiliated, this is of course also a very pleasant thing for them. I lost. The two landed, and Malfoy looked at the golden snitch in George's hand, and the whole person collapsed like a deflated balloon. From today on, he will definitely become a laughingstock of Slytherin and will also disappoint his father. Father spent so much money to make him a Seeker, so that he could compete with Harry, but he lost it. Since you want to be a Seeker so much, then you can be one. George returned the golden snitch to Flint and said to the dejected Malfoy. Malfoy instantly raised his head and looked at George with incredible eyes. Snape and others also looked at George with surprise, not understanding what he was doing. I think whether it is a Seeker, a Chaser, a Beater, or a Goalkeeper, they are all equally important, and I have the confidence to win honor for Slytherin, but I just tried it, and the Seeker seems a bit boring and not challenging. George shrugged, and then looked at Malfoy with a smile. And I don't like to deprive others of their dreams. The eyes of the other players looking at George softened a lot. Thank you. Malfoy was silent for a few seconds and thanked George for the first time. He used to dislike George because the other party not only stole all his limelight, but also openly mocked him. But now, he suddenly felt that George didn't seem to disgust him so much, and he was a little grateful to George in his heart. After all, George was really amazing. In this case, he was willing to give him some face and let him survive. As Slytherins, we should help each other and work hard for the honor of Slytherin, right? George patted Malfoy on the shoulder, and this time Malfoy did not show any disgust on his face. Little Malfoy, hold it. Slytherin is like this. If you are a weak person, even if you show goodwill, the other party will just think you are easy to bully, but if you are strong enough, he will admire you and be willing to follow you from the bottom of his heart. Is Malfoy a very evil person? Of course not, he is just a proud child, and his nature is actually kinder than his two followers. Before, because the other party was looking for trouble first, he deliberately suppressed the other party, but if there is a chance to conquer, it is also good. The Malfoy family is quite prestigious among pure bloods, and there may be many places to use before Voldemort is resurrected. As for Seekers, Beaters, Chasers and Keepers, there is really no difference in his eyes. On the contrary, he actually thinks that Chasers are easier to improve his reputation than Seekers. In a normal game, the Seeker is the one who attracts the most attention, because the game is not over until the Seeker catches the snitch, and the Seeker who catches the snitch can add a full 150 points to the entire team. In most cases, as long as the level of the two teams is not too different, the score difference will not be 150 points, so it is generally assumed that whichever team Seeker catches the snitch wins. If he, as a Chaser, can pull the score to more than 150 points before the Seeker catches the snitch, then he will be more dazzling than the Seeker. This is also a very rare thing in the history of Quidditch at Hogwarts. Of course, what he did was effective for the inexperienced young Malfoy, but it would definitely not work against an old-timer like the elder Malfoy. The elder Malfoy was not very loyal to Voldemort. Well said. What Slytherin needs most is unity. Since George gave up voluntarily, Malfoy will be the Seeker and George will be the Chaser. Snape rarely showed his smile that was uglier than crying. As the Dean of Slytherin, he was naturally very happy to see such a harmonious scene, and his evaluation of George also rose to a higher level. It is really rare to have such a broad mind and ideas at this age. If he had the same mind and ideas as George, instead of spending all his time studying the dark arts, he wouldn't have let the damn Potter take advantage of Lily. You guys train well. After Snape left, everyone started Quidditch training. George, as a new chaser, also showed his superb skills in chasing. The Seeker is to catch the golden snitch, the Goalkeeper is to guard the goal, the Beater is to hit the bludger to interfere with the opponent's players, and the Chaser is to grab the quaffle and then shoot. This shot can be made with hands, feet, or a flying broom, as long as no magic is used. George's physical fitness is comparable to that of Captain Flint, who has the blood of a troll, but because of his body, he is much more flexible than him, plus he has absolute control over the flying broom, so basically, from grabbing the ball to dodging, to shooting, it is all done in one go. Chapter 45: A Roaring Letter to Leon. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. After joining the Slytherin team, George's life began to calm down. Daily score sweeping, daily study and research of magic, daily going to the library to scan books, improving his understanding of magic, and daily chasing teachers of various subjects to ask magic. As for Quidditch training, because of his superb skills, Snape allowed him to go less. As time went by, his magical knowledge and magic level also grew rapidly. He had almost mastered the first-year spells and began to learn the second-year content in advance. More than 2 months passed in a flash, and time slowly came to October. The weather began to get colder, and many little wizards caught a cold. Fortunately, the school doctor Ms. Pomfrey made a kind of stimulant. After drinking it, smoke would come out of the ears for several hours, but the effect was also immediate, and the cold could be easily cured. George sat by the window in the library, reading a book quietly at this time. It was drizzling outside the window, and from time to time, little witches in the library would look up and secretly look at him. With the rich meals at Hogwarts in the past few months, he is no longer as thin as before. It's time, you can go back. The thin and old librarian, Mrs. Pants, stood up and said to all the young wizards who were still reading in the library. George looked at the time. It was already 8 o'clock in the evening, and the library was about to close. He borrowed the books he had not finished reading, left the library, and planned to go back to the Slytherin common room to continue reading. At the same time, it was 8 o'clock in the morning in the Marvel world, and George's body had already ridden a motorcycle to the Bronx. Tony Stark has been kidnapped for almost 3 months, and it is estimated that he will escape back soon. In the past 3 months, Lion has completely turned the Chabelle family into the Lion family. So the previous plan should also be prepared. In fact, because of the previous car change and the meals in the past few months, Gabriella and Wolverine's savings are almost gone. He really needs to make money, and the children are in urgent need of school. These children in the laboratory have been trained to be killers since childhood. They have never received normal education and lack common sense. Gabriella is just an ordinary nurse with limited education. Isa is a driver with no education and is still trying to learn how to fly a plane. Wolverine can teach combat and history, but not so much in other aspects. Caliban originally relied on his ability to do black market business because he had no education. The most comprehensive one is Professor X, who graduated from Harvard University at the age of 16, and also went to Oxford University and Columbia University, and obtained multiple doctoral degrees in biology, psychology, and other fields, but he is in poor health and needs to take medicine frequently. Most of the time, he stays in the EEG room to prevent sudden epilepsy. On the rooftop of the dance hall in the Bronx, George took out an ordinary letter and put it on the ground, then waved his hands quickly to cast a spell. After the magic was imprinted on the envelope, he picked up the envelope and recorded what he wanted to say. Yes, he was making a roaring letter at this time. He didn't spend every day in the library in vain. In addition to learning magic, he also spent time learning some alchemy, that is, how to make magic items. He naturally couldn't master difficult magic items like wands, flying brooms, magic cars and door keys so quickly, but simple ones like howling letters were easy to get started. After making a howling letter, he pinned a pin on it and waited quietly on the rooftop. About half an hour later, the triumphant Leon, holding a cigar, walked out of the dance hall with a group of younger brothers, and got into the extended Lincoln parked at the door. At this time, George also used his ability to control the pin, flew out of the rooftop with the howling letter, and slid in when the car door was about to close. During this time, he thought carefully that he should be more cautious about people like Leon who are in the underground world, at least before his strength can ignore modern firearms, so if possible, try not to contact too frequently and keep the sense of mystery as much as possible. The unknown is usually the most terrifying. In this way, even if Leon encounters threats in the future, as long as it is not a fatal threat, he should not dare to betray him, because he is too mysterious in Leon's eyes. Once betrayed, he does not know how terrible the revenge will be, so it is safer. A letter. Leon was about to close the door, and suddenly found a letter squeezed in through the seam of the car and fell on his legs, which was also a bit confusing, but after seeing the name on the envelope, his pupils shrank instantly, so he quickly opened the door and looked outside. "Sir, what's wrong?" The younger brother in charge of driving asked with some confusion. Leon turned his head and looked around, and found that there were only his younger brothers around, and there was no one else. He took a deep breath and sat back in the car and ordered, "It's okay, you get off the car and wait for me first, I want to be alone in the car." Although the younger brother driving didn't understand what was going on, he still got off the car honestly. Leon picked up the letter in his hand. There was only one word on the envelope, that is death. More than 2 months ago, he was almost killed, and a mysterious man called Death saved him. Now he has finally cleared away all obstacles, including the remnants led by Chebel's son, Chebel the Younger, and completely transformed the Chebel family into the Lion family. He also became one of the 13 most powerful people in the Bronx underground world. But the god of death never showed up, which became a headache for him. On the one hand, he was sincerely grateful for the other party's life-saving grace and wanted to repay him. On the other hand, he was also very afraid of such a mysterious guy who could kill Chebel at will, because that means that it seems just as easy for the other party to kill him. This is also one of the reasons why he always takes a group of younger brothers with him when he goes out. People are like this. When they are younger brothers, they don't think so much in their hearts, and they are not so afraid of death, but when they become the boss, the one who is high above, they start to think a lot and start to fear death. Picking up the envelope, he stretched out his hand and opened it carefully, but what puzzled him was that the envelope was empty and there was no letter. Just the next second, he opened his mouth in surprise and froze on the spot. Because the envelope suddenly flew out of his hand, floating in the air and turned into a mouth that spoke. "Leon, wait for me on the rooftop at 12 o'clock tonight." After that, the mouth bit itself into pieces and fell down. It took Leon 10 seconds to react, then he took a deep breath and murmured. "What kind of existence is this gentleman? Is he a god, or a demon from hell?" At this time, he remembered the wish he made before his death on the rooftop, and couldn't help shuddering. Chapter 46. The Carlson family is in trouble. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. At midnight, Leon walked onto the rooftop alone. The moon was very round tonight, and the bright moonlight fell on the rooftop, which made his nervous heart relax a little, facing a being who could kill him at any time. Even though he knew that the other party was unlikely to kill him, otherwise there would be no need to go to great lengths to save him, he was still a little frightened in his heart. "Here it comes." A familiar voice sounded, and he looked up in the direction of the voice. At some point, George, wearing a death mask, had appeared above his head, and was now walking slowly down from the sky in the moonlight. That scene was like a god. "Mr. Death, what do you want?" Leon bent down subconsciously. After landing, George looked up and down at Leon and said, "If I kill all the leaders of the other 12 families in the Bronx, can you take over all their territories?" He thought about it, and the cash alone was still too little. If he cooperated with Leon to take over the entire underground world of the Bronx, then he could share it with Leon. This is what it means to really make a big fortune, and you won't have to worry about money anymore. As for whether the Bronx becomes better or worse after Leon rules the entire underground world of the Bronx, it has nothing to do with him. To be honest, no matter how hard life is for the people here, it has nothing to do with him. He is not a superhero who thinks about saving people and saving all living beings every day. It's good enough for him to save himself. What? Leon's legs softened when he heard this, and he almost sat down on the ground in fear. He didn't expect George's first words to be so fierce. He just turned the Chebel family into the Leon family, and asked him to take over the entire underground world of the Bronx. None of the 12 families are easy to deal with. However, when he saw the seriousness in George's eyes and knew that he was not joking, he couldn't help but hold back his saliva. To be honest, this was really tempting for him, but in the end he smiled bitterly and shook his head. "Impossible, with my strength, I can't take on so many families. Even if I can, I can't take them." "Why?" George raised his eyebrows. He could understand the former, but what did the latter mean? Leon was afraid of making George angry, so he quickly explained. "You may not understand that the reason why there are 13 families in the Bronx is that it was decided by King Jean Bing, the king of the entire American underground world. Even if you kill all the people in their 12 families, I can't take over all their territories. In the end, there will be 12 new families to replace the previous 12 families. Jean Bing will not allow a family that affects his status to appear in the Bronx." "Jean Bing, what if you kill him?" George frowned slightly. He knew Jean Bing, but he didn't expect Jean Bing to have such a great influence on the underground world. Even the number of families in the Bronx was controlled by Jean Bing, but Jean Bing was an ordinary person after all. Even if his physical strength was close to the human limit, it would not be too difficult for him to kill the other party. The main thing was that it was not easy to find the other party. Hearing George say that killing Kingpin is as easy as killing a chicken, Leon couldn't help but take a breath. Well, even if you kill Kingpin, it won't work. This matter is not that simple. Once Kingpin dies, the whole underground world will be in chaos. At that time, the major families will inevitably fight, not only in the Bronx, but also in other places. More powerful families. With my strength, it is impossible to protect the entire Bronx, and even the current territory may be threatened. Then forget it. George felt that what Leon said made sense. Unless he cleaned up the entire underground world in the United States, Leon might be killed one day when he was away, and he didn't have the time and energy to do that. Doing so would inevitably attract the attention of major organizations and forces, which would also go against his original intention, making money just to have more time to settle down and study magic. Spending a lot of time and energy on clearing the underground world would be putting the cart before the horse. Then, just solve one family and swallow up his territory and property. Is there any problem? George spoke again. This time, Leon did not refuse immediately, but thought for a few seconds and replied. If it is just one family, there is no problem. I will divide some of it to support a small family. As long as the number of 13 families remains unchanged, Jean Bing will at most send someone to reprimand them. This kind of thing has happened in the Bronx before. The 13 families jointly manage the Bronx. There are many cases of fighting for interests. It is not uncommon for small families to defeat large families. For such a fight, Jean Bing has always been happy to see it happen. On the contrary, if the 13 families are of the same blood, it is not what Jean Bing wants to see. Okay, then you provide a family that doesn't get along with you. In the next few days, I will let their leaders die accidentally. At that time, you will take over their territory with people, and the benefits will be divided equally in the future. George nodded. Since it is impossible to wipe out all 12 families, then destroying one and taking all the benefits will definitely be a lot. At least it should be more than his previous plan to just rob the cash of the 12 families. The Carlson family, their territory is right next to us, and they often have friction with us. This time, they took advantage of the internal fight between me and Little Chabelle to rob us of a lot of our territory. I originally planned to fight with them and take back those territories. If their leaders suddenly die, then I am confident that I can take over all their territories. At this time, Leon's expression became a little excited. Let alone a 50-50 split of the benefits. Even if it was all given to George, he would have no objection. George did save his life, and during this period, the Carlson family took advantage of the fire to rob him, and he lost several brothers who had a good relationship with him. Originally, he had no intention of letting the other party go. It's just that now, after experiencing the internal fight, the strength is much weaker than before, and it is definitely impossible to fight, and at most it will disgust the other party. But now it's different. This mysterious Mr. Death is willing to take action, so this revenge can definitely be avenged. Collect the intelligence of this family, and I will come to get it tomorrow night. After leaving a word, George jumped off the rooftop and disappeared into the darkness. Although it was a little different from his original plan, the result was not too bad. He is not a god, and it is impossible for him to calculate everything. Even if he has many advantages in intelligence, some mistakes are inevitable, but he thinks this is also normal. If the plan changes, then make a new plan. The important thing is that he must have the ability to change the plan calmly and still achieve the goals smoothly, so in the final analysis, strength is the foundation. With strength, even if the world is in chaos and completely deviates from the plots he knows, it is no big deal. Chapter 47 Combination of Psychic Powers and Soul Reading Spells. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. It seems that we can't give up on Tony Stark. After leaving the rooftop, George did not return to school, but rode his beloved scooter straight to Manhattan, because he decided to find time to go to the Middle East to rescue Tony. Before, he considered that taking Wolverine to rescue Tony might attract the attention of S.H.I.E.L.D., and it is better to rely on oneself than on others, so he decided to find an agent, then rob all the families in the Bronx, and then invest in Stark stocks to make a fortune. But now the situation has changed, and he has thought about it carefully during this period of time, and he thought of a problem that he had ignored before. that is, can Tony Stark really escape by himself? If it is a movie universe, there will be no problem, but this is not a movie universe. There are mutants such as Wolverine and Professor X here. I don't know which Marvel universe it is. If Tony Stark fails to escape and dies in that cave, he will lose all his money. How to ensure that buying Stark stocks will definitely make money? He felt that it would be safest if he went to the Middle East in person, rescued Tony Stark, and then immediately asked Leon to use all his cash to buy Stark stocks. As for the problem of being discovered by S.H.I.E.L.D., he had also thought about it. He was no longer the same as before, only knowing how to open the lock, not developing much ability, and bringing a group of cumbersome novices with him. Now, he had Leon, the boss of one of the 13 families in the Bronx, as a partner, who could easily create a real identity for him as a disguise. The magnetic force had been developed to the point where it could deflect sniper bullets for long-range sniping, and he had mastered all the spells for the first grade, as well as some spells outside the textbook. Therefore, he could go to the Middle East alone to rescue Tony Stark without being discovered by others. If possible, he could also find Tony Stark to cooperate secretly, so that he would have partners in both the black and white worlds, and many things would be easier to handle in the future. Tony won't die so easily. The military has not given up searching for Tony until now, and even if Tony really has an accident, Stark Group has the best engineers in the world, and our weapons are still the best in the world, so don't worry about the future of Stark Group, please believe us. In the most upscale banquet hall in New York, Obadiah Stane stood on the podium of the banquet, talking endlessly about saving the stock price of Stark Group. After the banquet, he sat in a luxury car driven by his bodyguards on the way to his Long Island villa, and couldn't help cursing. These damn short-sighted ghosts, do they really think that without Tony Stark, the group can't develop better weapons? He knew that if Tony Stark had an accident, the group's stock price would fall, but he didn't expect it to fall so much. If the stock price was not saved, even if Tony really died, the Stark Group would be completely controlled by him, and it would shrink greatly. And the 10 rings, I will kill them all sooner or later. How dare you blackmail me? Tony Stark was attacked in the Middle East because he hired the terrorist organization 10 Rings to eliminate Tony Stark and completely control the Stark Group. As a result, the 10 Rings recognized Tony Stark's identity and immediately asked for a high price that even he couldn't afford. Have you found the location of the 10 Rings? Boss, we can only lock on the desert near Baghlan province in Afghanistan, but it will take another half a month to find the specific location in the desert. The bodyguard who was driving replied. After determining the location, send someone to kill Tony and the 10 Rings together. Obadiah Stane's eyes were full of viciousness. Dare to threaten him, then die. Okay, here comes the work. At this time, George saw Obadiah Stane's car coming from a distance with a telescope, and immediately landed beside the road, and then began to chant to the ground. Quickly soften. A blue magic beam hit the ground, and the originally hard ground immediately began to soften and collapse. When Obadiah Stane's high-speed car passed here, it was directly flipped out because of the collapse of the ground, and fell on the side of the road, sliding for a long distance. After investigating for a few days, he knew that this road was basically the only way for Obadiah Stane to go home, so he squatted here. As for why he didn't squat at his home, it was mainly because he wanted to create a car accident to hospitalize Obadiah Stane, which would also reduce the stock price of Stark Group. Secondly, because there were many bodyguards in Obadiah Stane's villa, it was still a bit troublesome for him to obtain intelligence without being noticed. Walking to the overturned car, Obadiah and the bodyguard inside were obviously seriously injured and were trying to unbuckle their seatbelts and crawl out. Good evening, Mr. Obadiah. George squatted on the ground and waved to the two people inside with a smile. The bodyguard was very alert and immediately gave up, unbuckled his seatbelt. Instead, he took out the pistol from his waist and was about to shoot George. However, George was prepared and had already started to prepare magic on the way over. Fainted. A blue magic light hit the bodyguard one step ahead of time, and the bodyguard fainted with his head tilted. Seeing this, Obadiah's pupils shrank, and he quickly said, "No matter who asks you to kill me, I will give you 10 times more than him. I am a little tempted, but I am not here to kill you." George smiled and looked at Obadiah, while activating his psychic ability and casting a spell. Legislatives. A month ago, he had asked the Legilimency Master Snape about the magic of Legilimency, but Snape did not agree to teach him at that time, thinking that it was too early for him to learn this magic, and such a difficult magic is not something he can master now. In order to learn this magic, he lied that he was a natural Legilimency who could read people's thoughts when they were not on guard, and could communicate with magical animals, so he wanted to learn this magic in advance. To better control his abilities, after some verification, it was confirmed that he seemed to be a natural Legilimency, and Snape was finally willing to teach him the Legilimency spell, although after a month of practice, he could only use this spell in a preliminary way, but with his second-level psychic ability, he could already forcefully read a person's mind, especially when he was afraid. "Tell me, where is Tony Stark?" Two sharp blades flew out from George's sleeves and hovered between Obadiah's eyes. "Otherwise, you will soon lose your eyes, then your ears, and finally your life." Chapter 48 8 Tracking Spells. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. I don't know what you are talking about. How do I know where Tony is? If I knew, I would definitely find someone to rescue him. When he disappeared, the group's stock price plummeted. Obadiah explained with a look of horror on his face, and there was no flaw in his expression and tone. If George hadn't used Legilimency and telepathy at the same time to read Obadiah's mental activities, he would have been deceived. Even when his life is threatened, he can still act so realistically. This guy is not a bad guy. Also, if he was kind, he wouldn't have tricked Tony into playing tricks, and he wouldn't have wiped out all the people from the Ten Rings gang. In the desert near Baghlan province in Afghanistan, it seems you don't know the exact location. Stopping Legilimency and telepathy, George frowned. He originally thought that Obadiah would know the location of the Ten Rings gang's lair, but it turned out that the other party had also been looking for it and only found a rough idea. "How do you know?" Hearing George's words, Obadiah was stunned, and George was too lazy to explain to him anymore, raised his hand and started to cast a spell on Obadiah. Everything is forgotten. This is the only spell he has learned from Lockhart in the past 3 months. Although it cannot be used as powerfully as Lockhart, it can still be done by simply erasing a small section of ordinary people's memories. After casting the forgetting spell on Obadiah, he also cast it on the unconscious bodyguard. After settling all this, he left on his motorcycle that had been parked on the roadside for a long time. Not long after George left, the bodyguard and Obadiah woke up leisurely, but they only remembered that the car had overturned, and then they fainted, but they had no memory of George. "Damn it, I'm going to fire you, loser. Call someone to rescue us immediately, and block the news immediately so that the outside world won't know that I was in a car accident." The next day, the news about Obadiah's injuries in the car accident was reported by those omnipotent New York reporters. Of course, these reporters also have to thank the kind person who put this breaking news on their desk. Executive CEO Tony Stark disappeared, and the main person in charge, Obadiah, was injured in a car accident. The share price of Stark Group suddenly fell to the bottom. However, as the world's largest group company, these are influential, but not fatal. It is just the difference between making more money and making less money. It's not easy to find someone in such a big desert. At the entrance of Hogwarts Castle, George looked at the snowflakes falling outside. After thinking for a moment, he turned and walked towards the Defense Against the Dark Arts office. "It seems that we need to go to the restricted book area to look for it. If you want to find traces of Tony Stark in the desert, even if the desert is not very big, it is still not an easy task, so he needs a magic that can find people. He has not seen this kind of magic in the normal bookshelf area of the library. He can only go to the restricted book area to see if there is any. Normally, many wizard spells are inspired by the abilities of magical animals, such as the Legilimency spell, which was developed based on the cat and leopard who was born with Legilimency. He didn't believe that no wizard had developed the magical tracking technique of the owl, and he remembered that Newt was very good at tracking magic and could even recreate the scene at that time. Tonks once mentioned during dinner that she was practicing a tracking spell to hunt down criminal dark wizards, but since there is a tracking spell, there will be an anti-tracking spell. He remembered that Sirius was proficient in anti-tracking spells. Aurors could not lock Sirius's position at all, and even owls could block it. But people in the Marvel world don't know how to counter tracking spells. As long as he can master a tracking spell, he can quickly find Tony Stark in the desert. to enter the forbidden book area, you need a teacher's approval note. Other teachers, even Snape, who currently values him the most, would not be able to give him an approval note to enter the restricted book area. After all, there is too much dangerous black magic and dangerous magic knowledge. If one is not too greedy, he may go astray and hurt himself, so he could only go to Lockhart, a teacher who could easily get approval slips with just a few compliments. Sure enough, because he had deliberately built a close relationship in the past few months, he got the approval slip to go to the restricted book area with almost no effort. Go, but don't mess with the precious magic book inside, or I won't let you go. Mrs. Pants looked at Lockhart's approval note in George's hand, frowned, and let him into the restricted book area with a warning. Compared with the thousands of magic books outside, there are far fewer books in the restricted book area, but they are arranged more neatly. It is obvious that few people come in to read. George skipped the books that recorded seductive black magic and began to look for the magic books that recorded tracking magic. It wasn't that he didn't want to read it, but the moment he entered the forbidden book area, his telepathy told him that someone was secretly watching him. If his prediction was correct, the person spying on him was most likely Dumbledore, perhaps using some kind of magic he didn't know, or a magic item. Ever since Voldemort found information about Horcruxes in the Forbidden Zone, it is understandable that Dumbledore has paid special attention to the Forbidden Zone and implemented some surveillance measures to prevent similar situations from happening again. As long as he doesn't touch dangerous black magic books, it won't be a big problem. After learning the tracking spell, if he is asked, he can just use the excuse of finding his biological parents to fool him. When Dumbledore is not in school, it won't be too late for him to go to the forbidden book area to learn those black magic. Found it. After searching for a while, he really found a magic book called 8 Ways to Find Lost People. After flipping through it, he found that it actually recorded 8 different tracking spells. There are tracking spells that will show arrows after casting the spell, tracking that will show footprints after casting, and advanced tracking like newts that will even reveal the shadow of the person. The most powerful one is the tracking involving time magic, which can directly go back in time to see what happened in the past, so as to know everything the person being tracked did. However, since this tracking technique was created, there is no record of any wizard who has learned it. At George's current level, the advanced tracking technique is definitely impossible. He only needs to learn the simplest one, the tracking technique with arrows. There are no buildings in the desert that block the view, and the tracking technique with arrows is enough for him to find Tony Stark. He left the restricted area with the book about the tracking spell, registered with Madame Pants, and returned to the Slytherin common room to study the simplest tracking spell. At the same time, the main body of the Marvel main world also began to purge the top leaders of the Carlson family. Chapter 49. Was it murder or an accident? You are listening at NovelFull.audio. At night, in the Bronx, in the most luxurious nightclub in the Carlson family's territory, deafening music, men and women twisting their bodies crazily, and the revealing and seductive performances on the stage, as well as the drug addicts in the corner who spent money to buy various contraband and were high. George sat at the bar and ordered a glass of wine. While drinking it intentionally or unintentionally, he looked around for his target. According to the information given by Leon, this nightclub controlled by the Carlson family is now managed by Carlson's youngest son, Carlson Jr., and Carlson Jr. comes here almost every night. Carlson Jr.'s biggest hobby is women, especially young and energetic women, preferably those who have not yet entered society or have just entered society. With his status, as long as he spends some money, a large number of young and energetic female college students are willing to accompany him, but he likes to have that sense of conquest, so coming to his own nightclub every day is also to find prey. Once he has a target, he will let his men take it back to his own exclusive room in the nightclub by force. If he is very satisfied, he will do it himself. Even the craziest one was to perform in the middle of the nightclub dance hall in full view of the public. Afterwards, as the heir of the Carlson family, the girl from an ordinary family with no background could only swallow her anger for the safety of herself and her family after being given some money and threatened. If she dared to resist, she would be drowned. Even some people with some background did not dare to confront the Carlson family head-on. Those who really couldn't afford to offend the Carlson family also knew what this nightclub was and would never come here to play. Those who came to his nightclub were either veterans, the group of people who came here to have fun, or young people who didn't know much about his nightclub. They were too naive and stupid. Some were curious, and some wanted to meet a beautiful love in the nightclub, meet a tall, handsome guy, and spend a wonderful night. However, the cruel reality would teach them how to be a person and let them understand that staying away from danger is the best protection for themselves. Here we go, seeing a sturdy bald man at the door, walking into the nightclub with a group of younger brothers, and sitting in the exclusive luxury booth of the nightclub. George gradually stood up. It was easy to kill Carlson. He could control the blade and cut Carlson's throat with one knife, but that was not what he wanted, because it would cause chaos. If it was not good, the senior members of the Carlson family would be scared and hide, and then things would become troublesome, and the senior members of the 13 families were assassinated one after another, which would also cause a sensation. So if possible, it would be better not to be so direct, and to reasonably let these senior members die, making everything look like an accident, which is the result he wants. He didn't want others to associate this with superpowers. Even when he saved Leon last time, others thought that Leon killed Chabel on the rooftop himself, instead of having the help of this mysterious man. It seems that I'm lucky today and found a little top-notch. Little Carlson had just sat down for a while when he found a satisfactory prey in the central dance floor. She looks good, tall, and the key is her temperament. It can be seen that she is a novice who came here for the first time. She can't dance freely. She is probably still a student. Boss, she seems to be leaving. Do you want us to go over and tie her up for you? The younger brother next to him was very good at reading her expression and asked immediately. However, Carlson put down his glass and waved his hand. I want to go in person this time. She reminds me of the girl last time. It's a pity that the girl committed suicide in the end. Otherwise, I could come more times. It seems that the boss plans to do it on the dance floor this time. Hearing Carlson's words, the younger brothers also became excited. What kind of boss leads what kind of younger brothers? They are all the same kind of stuff. Carlson got up and walked quickly into the dance floor, and stopped the girl in the noisy dance floor before she left. First, there was a verbal teasing, and then he started to make moves. The girl wanted to resist, but how could she be a match for the tall Carlson? And Carlson's threat also made the girl very scared. As for the companions who came with the girl, they had been surrounded by Carlson's men, and could not move. However, just when Carlson was about to succeed, George in the crowd also came to the position closest to Carlson. Tarantella dance. A small blue light shot at Carlson inconspicuously in the colorful dance floor. After being hit by the blue light, Carlson suddenly stopped his hands and his legs began to twitch uncontrollably, as if he was dancing a very difficult quick-step dance, and his younger brother saw that the boss was actually excited and dancing at this time, thinking that the boss had some new tricks, and immediately cheered loudly for the boss's dance. The girl whose clothes were torn half was also stunned, not knowing why the bully in front of her suddenly danced. Even more confused was Carlson himself, because he himself didn't know why he suddenly danced. Leg stand still. The dancing spell was followed by the leg-locking spell. Carlson seemed to have accidentally tripped while dancing, and he fell backwards because his center of balance was unstable. If he just fell, it would be nothing. The key point is that when he fell, a nail on the body of a nearby gangster wearing a leather jacket with rivets suddenly broke and fell to the ground, rolling to the place where Carlson fell. Squeak! The nail pointed upwards and pierced Carlson's back of the head fiercely, bleeding profusely, and he died on the spot. He's dead. He's dead. For a moment, the dance floor was full of screams, everyone fled in all directions, and George quietly left the nightclub with the crowd. The nail was naturally not an accident, but was controlled by his ability. 2 hours later, the grief-stricken old Carlson was in the dance hall, listening to the report of his men. Through monitoring and investigation, it can be confirmed that this was indeed just an accident, not a deliberate murder. I told him a long time ago to be restrained, but he just didn't listen, and he deserved it. All those men who protected him should be sunk into the sea to feed the fish. Confirming that his son was not murdered, but died in an accident. Old Carlson sighed, got up with a cane and left the nightclub. The death of his son made him sad, but what troubled him more was the impact of the death of the heir. Originally, his son was the heir, and the family leaders were willing to assist his son. Recently, they also took over some of the territory of the Chabel family. Everything was going in a good direction, but now that the only heir is dead, the family leaders will definitely be ready to move. If he doesn't handle it properly later, the whole family may be in chaos. At that time, everyone will want to compete for his position, which will definitely be 10 times more chaotic than the Chaebel family. If one thing goes wrong, he will have to pay for it. My health is not bad, I can suppress it. It seems that I have to quickly determine the new heir. Chapter 50 Heading to Afghanistan. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. The next day, dark clouds and light rain covered the whole of New York. In the high-end cemetery in the Bronx, old Carlson leaned on a cane and looked at his son's tombstone. The sadness of the old man sending the young man away came to his mind, and a few tears could not help but flow down his fierce face. Let's go, there are more important things to do today. Old Carlson wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes, and under the escort of his younger brothers, he turned and walked out of the cemetery. In front of a tombstone not far from them, George was also casting a spell. Oolong out of the hole, as the spell took shape, a gray-black mamba snake appeared in front of him, and then quickly got into the bushes and swam towards the location of old Carlson. About a minute later, George heard the screams of old Carlson and the panicked exclamations of his younger brothers. The nearest hospital to this cemetery is also 30 minutes away. With old Carlson's body, he can't survive more than 15 minutes after being bitten by a black mamba snake. Once old Carlson dies, the Carlson family will be in chaos. The senior executives will naturally take action to compete for the position of the boss. At that time, he can take advantage of the situation to eliminate most of those senior executives. Even if a sniper rifle is used, others will no longer doubt it, and just think that these senior executives are looking for someone to fight each other. 3 days later, at night, on the rooftop. The Carlson family has been fighting internally in the past few days, and its strength has been greatly damaged. I plan to take action tomorrow and eat up all their territory. Lion looked at George and said respectfully. He was also quite shocked that George had disintegrated most of the Carlson family, one of the 13 families, in just a few days. It's nothing to say that those who were shot later, but the accidental death of Carlson and his son at the beginning really scared him, because even if he knew that it was George who did it, there was no trace of human intervention. Everyone thought that Carlson and his son were too unlucky, so one accidentally fell to death and the other accidentally died of snake bites. Sometimes he wondered, if George wanted to kill him, would he also die in an accident like Carlson and his son without knowing it? This was simply too terrible. Just like Satan wanted to take your soul away, no matter how you resisted, you could not avoid it, so he had a deeper fear of George in his heart. Where should I transfer the money to you? No need to transfer it to me, put it in your account, I will take it from you when I need it. George nodded and replied, he didn't have an account and couldn't transfer the money. If he transferred it to Wolverine and Gabriella's account, it would be easy to expose his identity. It's better to put it with Leon, take some cash when you need it, and let Leon pay directly when you need a large sum of money. I believe that after this series of things, Leon should not dare to think about his money. By the way, after taking over Carlson's territory, cash out as much liquidity as possible. If necessary, mortgage everything that can be mortgaged to the bank for a loan, and then wait for my call. Hearing George's words, Leon was also stunned, obviously not understanding what was going on. George did not explain too much, just said. If you believe me, then do as I say, you can make a lot of money. If you don't believe me, I won't force you, as long as you use all my share to buy Stark Group stocks. There is no need to tell Leon about his plan to save Tony Stark, and it would be bad to say too much. In the end, as long as he makes money, Leon will naturally trust him more and more. I absolutely believe you. Leon immediately patted his chest and replied, this is not because he is afraid of George's words against his will, but because he really believes in the various magical abilities George has shown. He thinks that maybe George has the ability to predict the future, and knowing that Stark Group stocks may rise sharply, he will let him buy them quickly. If that was true, he would really make a fortune, even more than if he had annexed the Carlson family, although they were one of the 13 families in the Bronx and were very successful in this area. They were actually just ants and elephants compared to the world-class behemoth Stark Group. The Bronx is just the poorest and most chaotic district in New York, while the Stark Group is the richest group on Earth. One day later, the newly emerged Lion family in the Bronx went all out to sweep the Carlson family, whose strength had reached a freezing point due to internal fighting, and took over 80% of the Carlson family's territory, leaving only 20% for the last surviving senior executive of the Carlson family. 2 days later, Lion frantically raised funds and even mortgaged his extended Lincoln to the bank, showing his full determination and trust in George. 3 days later, the playground of the mutant school slowly opened, and an invisible fighter slowly took off and flew towards Baghlan province, Afghanistan. There was no Wolverine on the X-Fighter, only George and Isha, who was flying the plane, originally. George was planning to ask Leon to send someone to take him to Afghanistan. But when he returned to school to discuss with Professor X, Isa said that she could already fly the X-Fighter smoothly. It was Professor X who gave Isa some professional guidance when he was not sick. Since Isa could fly the X-Fighter to take him to Afghanistan, that would be the best. The fighter plane could go directly to the desert, saving time and not worrying about exposing his identity by changing cars. As for why he didn't bring Wolverine to help, the main reason is that he is now strong enough to deal with the terrorists of the Ten Rings, and Wolverine was once a famous figure, so Tony should be able to recognize him. Even if he can't recognize him, he will definitely know it after he goes back and asks Jarvis to check. He doesn't want Tony to know his identity yet. The more people know his identity, the more risk of exposure. Even if the other party is Iron Man, he should be more cautious. Wait for another 2 years, his strength will be stronger, Professor X and Wolverine will be able to recover their strength, and those mutant children will be able to skillfully use their abilities to fight, so they don't have to be as careful as they are now. The speed of the X-Fighter is very fast. It flew to the desert outside Baghlan province, Afghanistan in just a few hours. Direction appears. As George's spell sounded, an arrow made of golden powder appeared in front of George, and as Isha's moving fighter plane moves, the arrow will also turn accordingly. However, this arrow can only point out the direction of the target in the east, west, south and north in a plane, and cannot distinguish up and down. It is okay to find people in this desert, but it is not very convenient in the city, because there are tall buildings in the city, and the person you are looking for is on the 18th floor, and you are on the first floor. You can't find him no matter how the arrow points. This tracking spell is not suitable for complex terrain. For complex terrain, you still need to use a better one that can show movement footprints, but he hasn't learned it yet.